I'm gonna do something a little different. You'll see in a second. It's basically based on what the little text box down there says. Huzzah. Alright, wow, let's begin. Get this nice and situated. Alright, so because I'm just trying to start out like some kind of content creator career, I'm just trying a bunch of weird stuff, I suppose, and seeing what sticks. And the reason why I'm doing it within the stream is because, like, right at the moment, I have to work to make a living. So I don't have a lot of time to pre-script and write and um, deliver content that is pre-envisioned. So basically, I'm just incorporating it into the stream, and then, well, I'm simulcasting this to YouTube and Twitch and Kick, just to try and pump up the numbers of viewers in the first instance, which is why I have this graphic here. So if you're on any other service, come follow me on Twitch, because that's going to be the main service that I stream on. However, I've been thinking, make a YouTube channel doing various different things. I have various different interests like geopolitics, science. I would consider myself like a maker. I have an audio engineering degree. I DJ, and I do live sound reinforcement for concerts. So maybe there might be a bit of modding hardware. Oh, and obviously gaming as well. So modding gaming hardware, modding audio equipment, building audio racks. Who knows what the future can hold really. But today, I thought I would just, have a crack at science communication. Um, and so basically, I was scrolling on Facebook just the other day, and no, not tickers. I saw an article about tobacco. Very convenient that I coughed just at that time. Um, and the article was about a um, basically a genetically engineered tobacco plant. And the tobacco plant, as you may know, is in cigarettes, of course, cigars, smoking for pipes, etc. Also used as an insecticide in some insecticide formulations. I have a picture of tobacco here. So usually it's grown in very humid climates, especially in South America, and also in the Netherlands. I think they have a very like large culture around tobacco. But what I saw the other day was that a bunch of scientists genetically engineered tobacco to produce 5 different psychedelic compounds. Now, I've got a short article here in The New Scientist. Tobacco plant altered to produce 5 psychedelic drugs. Genetically engineering tobacco plants could enable a more sustainable production method for psychedelic drugs, which are increasingly in demand for research and medical uses. So I don't know if you know, but psychology is studying psychedelic substances for the use of treating depression, PTSD, schizophrenia, certain other cognitive dysfunctions like ADHD, I suppose. Um, I'm just trying to think, like palliative care, assisted dying, just complex trauma in general. I think there's wide and varied applications for psychedelic drugs, but one of the major hurdles to get over is administering it in a way that is therapeutic, which is a big challenge because I know that in general, scientists and science likes to do everything in a very I would say, sterile manner, in a lab, people in white coats, in a, you're laid out on a gurney in a hospital or something of that nature. Um, I know for a fact that this is going to cause a problem because I don't think that the administration of such substances in those settings would be conducive to a pleasant experience, which is probably what you're going to want to give the individual in order for them to have a meaningful experience that affects them in a way that allows them to progress with their life. Anyway, let's read the article. Scientists have engineered tobacco plants to produce 5 powerful psychedelic compounds, normally found in other plants, fungi, and animals in a single crop. They argue that using plants to manufacture the drugs would be simpler and more sustainable than existing processes, making research into therapeutic uses and production of future medicines easier. With the addition of 9 genes, the plants were able to produce psilocin, psilocybin, usually found in magic mushrooms, DMT or dimethyltryptamine, otherwise known as that drug that you probably heard Joe Rogan talk about, like, hey dude, have you ever done DMT? Bufotenin, which is a toxin emitted by toads, and it's commonly attributed to, I can't remember, it's like some kind of Coloradoan frog or toad that people lick to become intoxicated, or like a drunk type of high. Also, you'll find, I'm in Australia, in Queensland, we have a humongous amount of toads, and dogs will develop a pathology in which they seek out toad poison. Firstly, they become interested in the toad simply because it's an animal and they wonder what it is, and they try and eat it, get it in their mouth, and they get intoxicated with the poison. And then after they've had that experience, they then seek it out, which is, I suppose, an example of just a mammalian inherent desire to experience an altered state in a creature that doesn't have very highly evolved complex thought. And 5-methoxy dimethyltryptamine. Oh, it does say the Colorado River toad right here. Oh my god. 5-methoxy DMT, yes, also excreted by a toad. I'm not sure about the Colorado River toad. I believe it's excreted by a toad called Bufo alvarius. And I think it's an South American or Amazonian frog. I may be incorrect on that. Basically, it's GMO tobacco that's absolutely teeming with drugs. Plants could easily be altered permanently with changes that become inheritable, but doing so could be problematic, given that the compounds are commonly used as recreational drugs. It's a little bit tricky if we have it inherited and then people will ask for seeds, he says. You can do it also in tomato, potato, corn. So basically, this is like tobacco, except, from The Simpsons, tobacco, the tomato tobacco that everyone gets addicted to eating. Tobacco! Except with tobacco and the most psychedelic compounds known to man. The medical uses of psychedelic compounds are becoming more popular and better understood, but harvesting them from natural sources risks populations threatened by habitat loss and overexploitation. So they're probably talking about certain plants that contain dimethyltryptamine in the wild, I suppose, because I believe that there's, with a lot of things like this, a lot of things that are attributed to alternative lifestyle and stuff like that. Like I know Palo Santo, which is a hardwood incense that you might find a lot of people burning at a music festival, for example. but it's actually endangered. And I think there are some places that harvest it sustainably, but a lot of it isn't harvested sustainably, which is a tragedy because a lot of people don't know that. And it does smell really nice. I quite like it. But it got me thinking about the nature of whether this tobacco plant would be 100% contained, right? Obviously, I feel like in the past, let's say Dr. Albert Hoffman, working for Sandoz laboratories in Basel, Switzerland, when he synthesized LSD in 1940 something, I can't remember the exact year, um, and experienced the first unintentional dosing of lysergic acid diethylamide whilst he rode his bicycle. And I can imagine that would have been a hell of a time, being the first person that had ever experienced that, having an amount that is basically who knows how much he had because he spilled it on himself. Assumedly, he must have somehow accidentally got it in his mucous membranes, because generally, if you don't wash it off, you can apparently wash it off and you're fine. But from what I hear, it needs to get inside of your mucous membranes, which would be your mouth, your nose, and your eyes, your ears, etc., or other orifices in your body. Now, my thought here is that they were researching that drug, and the CIA used that for various things. Um, Operation Midnight Climax, MK Ultra, etc. Um, but I'm wondering, LSD escaped the lab and became a popular recreational drug, and that's widely known and widely documented. And you have people famously like Timothy Leary popularizing its youth, and he was a professor at Stanford, I think, Stanford or Harvard, in America, one of the Ivy Leagues, and he famously coined the term drop in. Oh no, I can't remember it. Oh, that's terrible that I can't remember that. It's such a good phrase that he coined. But yeah, he famously lost his professorship at the university that he worked at on account of the fact that he was giving away um, research samples that he had been given by Sandoz, I believe, because he was a psychology professor, and giving it to his students. And I can only imagine that there's some kind of weird sex cult spirituality thing that ended up revolving around that. Um, Let me just see, Timothy Leary. This is, as I said, very, very unscripted. I want to see. I'm very interested to know if I got it right. Education. It was Berkeley? Is that where he was a psychologist? Professorship. Stayed on the Bay Area, assistant, psychology, University of California, San Francisco. Okay, I got it incorrect. I need to find his quote, his most famous quote. Let's Google it. Oh, it's like, there it is. Turn on, tune in, drop out. How could I forget that? Popularized. I wonder if he came up with it. The article is about the phrase attributed. Okay. So perhaps he didn't coin the phrase. In Australia, he said so. Given to him by Marshall McLuhan during a lunch in New York City. Canadian philosopher. So, anyway, in San Francisco, that's where I believe that's ground zero for the early LSD test parties that existed, and I realize I'm whitewashing myself out because I'm wearing a white shirt with a white background. Um, cool. I got some of that right. Ah, I must see images of the man. What a legend. That's the guy. What a happy looking fellow. I think he wrote some books also. Can't remember what books though. Sorry, I'm not as learned as I'm trying to come across. Anyway, so the tobacco plant produces nicotine, and apparently the plant wasn't actually selected for the fact that it produced a drug that is psychoactive in the human brain. Now, it was selected because of the fact that it's incredibly fast growing and incredibly hardy, and possibly even for the fact that it had a higher likelihood of being able to pass on the gene. Um, so, where have we got exogenous chemicals? So I've got these images here of the exogenous chemicals that the plant was altered genetically to create. So there's the dimethyltryptamine, the psilocybin, which comes from mushrooms containing, well, what you would call magic mushrooms. So there's a large number of variety of magic mushrooms that you can read about in certain mycology books. Psilocin, which is effectively psilocybin with this phosphor group dropped off. Bufotenin, which is the excretions of toads, or the Colorado and river toad in this particular example, and 5-MeO-DMT, which I think I said comes out of... Oh, okay. That. I just remembered it's... No, Incilus previously. Oh, they renamed it. Oh my god. I'm not up on the law. You try and cite a scientific name, and they change that shit on you. Incilius alvarius. Alright, so it is an excretion of the Colorado river toad. Anyway, we look at these molecules and you'll notice that there's something very similar about all of them. And that is their base structure. And this other picture here compares their structures to the structure of serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter hormone that regulates happiness. So this means that there is an emergent field of study relating to psychedelic drugs, such as the ones that they've caused this tobacco plant to synthesize in relation to treating depression, anxieties, PTSD, etc. A whole variety of emergent science coming out of this. And I think there have been a lot of studies that have been done on ketamine infusion and its ability to... trying to think of the opposite word of apoptosis. Program managed cell death is apoptosis, necrosis, apoptosis, autophagy. What is the reverse? Anastasis, rising to life. All right, here we go. Natural cell recovery phenomenon that rescues cells from the brink of death. Alright, so I'm going to go and say that it's going to go a step further than anastasis, which this is a word that I'm learning right now. That not only does it save cells that are on the verge of what did they say? Necrosis and apoptosis. Apoptosis is managed cell death, the natural cell death that would occur. Uh, and necrosis is uncontrolled response to severe injury. And then anastasis is the natural cell recovery phenomenon that resuscitates and rescues cells from the brink of death. Um, I would even go further than that and say that these substances can even cause a, I suppose, I'm not sure if this is the right terminology, but a neurogenesis. Um, Process where neural stem cells differentiate into new functional neurons. Right, cool. So the dendritic forms of a neuron interconnect with other neurons. So a neurogenesis is a process whereby the stem cells interact and interconnect and generate new neurons. And I would say that these substances not only do the procedure of anastasis and rescue and recover cells, but they also responsible for neurogenesis. So that is it for the two exogenous chemicals. Not two, rather. Sorry, the five. Five is five. Yeah, five is hold your fingers. I'm a big smart girl. Um, the five exogenous substances that they've had these nicotine plants produce. Now, I've already shown you the relative similarity between serotonin and dimethyltryptamine and psilocybin, which is what creates the novel application in the indication of depression treatment or anxiety treatment or complex PTSD treatment for these substances. And we'll have a look at some of the other neurotransmitter hormones. We have here serotonin and melatonin. They also have a very similar structure to the substances in question, and serotonin and dopamine. Serotonin regulates happiness and motivation, or dopamine regulates that as well. A lot of these substances work in concert with each other to create proper homeostatic function in the human brain. And when you have issues, let's say, for example, I myself have ADHD, right, which is a natural endogenous dopamine resource lack. And so what that does is it causes problems in specifically motivation, especially in my case. I have what you call inattentive type ADHD, which means that not that I can't focus on anything, but that I have a hard time developing focus on something. And then I have a hard time changing what I'm doing from one thing to another. So I'll often find myself getting absorbed into things that are not doing me any favors. I just reduce a bit of that white bright light coming off my monitor there. Not doing me any favors, but they just have gained my attention, and I'm putting all of my attention on it. And I'm having a hard time switching topic to something that's more productive, let's say. So that is a problem of low endogenous dopamine. And you can rectify that with drugs such as like amphetamines, methylphenidates. Methylphenidates are actually kind of very similar to other psychedelic plants that exist in the world. For example, mescaline. Mescaline does a very similar thing in the brain as that which Ritalin does. However, it does it in the reverse function. I believe methylphenidate is a antagonist of dopamine receptors, and mescaline is an agonist of dopamine receptors, and they both cause buildups of dopamine, but in similar yet different ways. It could be reversed. It might be agonist and antagonist between the two drugs. I'm not 100% focusing on Ritalin and mescaline containing cactus mescaline alkaloids, phenethylamine alkaloids contained within plants that may exist. we're focusing here solely mostly on the tobacco. So, these chemicals that they've had these tobacco plants produce that are very similar to endogenous neurotransmitters are being used for the treatment and study of depression and human consciousness, anxiety, PTSD, all these kinds of things. But why? Oh, before we do that, I'll just show you this. I got this as well because steroid hormones, which are progesterone, estradiol, testosterone, cortisol. Cortisol, the stress hormone. I'm sure you know what all these other ones are. These are the male and female hormones. They're also very, very basic molecules, very similar building blocks, but not quite exactly the same. But I just thought I would highlight on the fact that there is a difference between, let's say, a hormone that is a steroid hormone and a hormone that is a neurotransmitter hormone. Let's close that. So, neuron growth, neurogenesis. I found this study. This is also a bunch of images that are showing. I'm not sure how they got these. Probably by radio microscopy or something like that. But I found after searching this search term, neuron growth from psychedelic drugs, this research paper. Beckley Foundation. I'm not 100% familiar with them. But here we are. A new study from the University of California, Davis, has found that psychedelic drugs such as LSD and DMT promote neural plasticity and development, indicating a potential mechanism for their therapeutic benefits. Patients who suffer from depression and post-traumatic stress disorder tend to have impaired neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. I'm glad I remembered that word because it's the perfect word to describe exactly what's going on. And I swear I did skim through a little bit of this, but I thought that, what's that guy's name, the reporter? Fuck it, I'll write it and we'll do it live. That's gonna work better for my little ADHD brain. Anyway, go back to reading. Promote neural plasticity. We did that. Impaired, I'll read back from here. Patients who suffer from depression and post-traumatic stress disorder tend to have impaired neurogenesis and neuroplasticity. Their brain cells grow more slowly and are less adaptable. These structural changes can lead to atrophy of various brain regions, including the hippocampus, which is involved in learning and memory, and the prefrontal cortex, which mediates personality and decision-making. Counteracting this damage by promoting structural and functional neural plasticity has been suggested as a novel way of treating psychiatric disorders. I swear I did not pre-read this. Oh my god. The pre-reading allegations are going to be so strong. However, relatively few compounds that promote neuroplasticity, which the authors of the new study term psychoplastogens. I've never seen that word in my entire life, and I love it. Psychoplastogens have been found capable of achieving this without drawbacks. Ketamine, a dissociative anesthetic with hallucinogenic properties, is a notable exception. By achieving pathways involved with forming neuron connections, it has been found to be an extremely effective therapeutic for treatment-resistant depression. Similarly, the Beckley Imperial Psychedelic Research Program has demonstrated significant and even longer-lasting benefits of psilocybin in the treatment of depression. And this shows depression severity following psilocybin-assisted psychotherapy. And this is depression severity on the, the x-axis, and on the y we have the baseline of depression severity. And I'm sure that that's done by one of those matrix questionnaires that you fill out. And here we have the results of a placebo-controlled ketamine study. So it seems like the placebo... Oh, no, sorry, I'm reading it the wrong way. The ketamine works remarkably well, and I was reading it oppositely, and that makes me look dumb, and I'm very, very sorry for that. The ketamine depression severity over time was effective in the first few weeks, but it seems like it's one of those things where you need to keep going back for more because it comes back to a similar baseline to the placebo in the placebo-controlled study. which I'm sure large pharmaceutical companies would be happy to continue to sell people ketamine forever for their depression. However, ketamine is very bad for your kidneys, and it will cause you to become incontinent if you use it a lot. I know of people who have abused ketamine, and yeah, they are incontinent and they will piss themselves, which is kind of sad. So, figure 1A. Psychedelics have a significant long-lasting effect in treating depression. Figure 1B. Ketamine has similarly shown promise in treatment-resistant depression, though effects do not last as long as those observed with psilocybin. And this was done in 2012 by Zarate et al. And others. So, this new study hoped to elucidate the cellular mechanism by which psychedelics achieve their therapeutic effect by investigating whether and how they affect neural growth and plasticity. In the first experiment, scientists treated cultures of cortical neurons with psychedelics. I need to know what a cortical neuron is. I wonder if it's related to... cortisol. Cortical neurons are the 10 to 16 billion specialized brain cells in the human cerebral cortex, crucial for higher order functions. Okay, so cortical as in relating to the cortex in the human brain. Got it. I'm sure they interface with cortisol, but cortisol is not inherent in the reason for their naming. I have no idea about that. I'm sorry. If you're a chemistry, neuroscience nerd, you can nerd out on that, but that's quite above my pay grade there. And where were we? Yeah. All right. Cultures. Okay, so the scientists, I'm imagining, are cultivating brain neurons in a petri dish or whatever medium is allowing them to continue to exist without immediately dying with psychedelics, and then observed how the neurons developed and increased in complexity. So I'm not sure what these two are talking about, but dimethyltryptamine and LSD. Seems here that there is a far greater number of dendrites coming out of the cortical neuron, which is what I was talking about with what was it? What do they call it? Anastasis and neurogenesis, as the paper goes back to discuss. Psychedelics significantly increased complexity of cortical neurons compared to VEH. Okay, so that's the no drug control. This was measured by analyzing how often cell branches and offshoots, neurites? Okay. So that's what you call a dendrite in a neuron, a neurite. We're learning. We're all learning here. Crossed over each other at various distances from the cell center. The figure includes a representative tracing of a cell from each treatment. So this is the distance from the center. And what's this? Number of crossings. So the number of crossings that occur from the distance of the center of the neuron increased dramatically. So we got... it's not super duper dramatically. Let's compare... Oh, okay. Sorry. This is the control. Nothing. LSD. So 6 to 10 to 11, I suppose. 6, 10 to 11. 6, 10. So I'm assuming the DOI is not effective, which kind of is what you would expect based on looking at these images here, which are, I'm assuming, representative of the actual neuron that was studied. They found that LSD, DMT, and DOI, I think that's a phenethylamine, DOI, all serotonergic Good Lord. Serotonergic. I know that word. Serotonergic psychedelics significantly increase the growth and complexity of neurons in a similar manner to ketamine, with LSD particularly potent. Interestingly, ibogaine was found to have no effect on neuroplasticity. I guess that's the chemical name for whatever's in ibogaine. And it was found to have no effect on neuroplasticity, but its metabolite noribogaine did, suggesting it was the active molecule in the anti-addictive properties of iboga. And iboga is I know it's a plant. It's used a lot in shamanic cultures in South America and maybe even Mexico, I think. I've heard of people traveling to Mexico to get a treatment with it. Let's have a look. Indole alkaloid, with an also very similar structure to neurochemical hormones. Noribogaine. What is DOI? Where is it from? I would love to know. Oh, Africa. Okay, cool. Maybe it's I've seen a bunch of documentaries where people from America travel to South America to experience some kind of like assisted psychotherapy with ibogaine. Usually it's veterans I've seen in these documentaries, which is good. Anybody that's experienced combat should absolutely be allowed to have access to these treatments that can help them live a full, complete, normal life after experiencing the horrors of war. And we need to do more for our veterans in probably every single country. As a comparison, amphetamine and serotonin, which share structural similarities with psychedelics, were also tested and were found to have no effect on measures of neurogenesis. Just because I'm familiar with amphetamine medications because I take dexamphetamines for my ADHD. And as far as I'm aware, they simply cause your dopamine supply to be released by overstimulating the neuron, which causes the dopamine to be kicked out of the receptor on the supply side, which I think makes it an agonist. I may get that mixed up. Let's look it up. Here we go. Agonist stimulates the neuron, full activation. Agonist and antagonist, less activation. Antagonist, no activation. Okay, so they are an agonist. They go into the neuron and stimulate the production of dopamine, which your receptor for dopamine is stimulated, and it makes up for your lack of endogenous dopamine to allow you to be a successful adult like I'm being right now. Look at me successing all over the place. Okay. The effects were observed not only in cell cultures, but also by testing the compounds on the brains of fly larvae and zebrafish, showing that they also have a tangible effect in living organisms. In a separate measure of neural plasticity, psychedelics were found to significantly increase the number of dendritic spines. There we go. There's my favorite word. Dendrite. Dendritic spines on cortical neurons, with LSD almost doubling their density. Figure 3. Where's figure 3? No. Yeah. Oh, they don't have their figures labeled. That's unprofessional. Very, very haphazard. Oh no, I'm just dumb. Figure 3 here. All right. So what do they do? Doubling their density. Wow, look at that. Incredible number of spines. Incredible. Effect of psychedelics on, here we go. These spines form synapses with other neurons and are a major site of molecular activity in the brain. Their functioning is closely related to higher cognition, and loss of these structures is a hallmark of depression and other neuropsychiatric disorders. Effects of psychedelics on spinogenesis and synaptogenesis, the number of dendritic spines on cortical neurons, which act as gateways and connections to other neurons, significantly increased following treatment with psychedelics. Positive effects were not only structural but functional. Electrophysiological recordings found that the frequency and strength of neural currents were increased for many hours after psychedelic compounds had been removed. Incredible. I'm not going to read any further, otherwise this portion of the video that I'm going to cut out is going to be incredibly long. However, I did want to take it a little tiny step further on the thinking about where this could go. So, I'm sure many people are aware of what a shaman is. A shaman is a spiritual, or shamanism is a spiritual practice that involves a practitioner, shaman, interacting with the spirit world through altered states of consciousness, such as trance, which can be achieved simply by banging a drum repetitively, or it can be caused by shamanic substances, such as back in the day, I think the Romans and the Eleusinian mysteries, they used to purposely consume ergot fungus and a particular type of fish that caused psychedelic effects. And the Eleusinian mysteries are it's like a mystery school, I suppose, where they teach you a bunch of things through a number of processes in which you become inherently aware of certain aspects of the universe that they deemed to be objectively true. Whether or not that is the case, but apparently people who would go through this process would become enlightened in a way that would make them live their life and become their fullest, most authentic self. So the goal of this is usually to direct spirits or spiritual energies into the physical world for the purpose of healing, divination, and to aid human beings. So shamanism is basically a early type of religion practiced by humans that are evolving past animism and totemism, which is a type of early anthropological phenomena in which early people ascribe power to animal spirits or totemic items, and then they seem to I'm just pulling this out of the top of my head, mind you. I'm going to get back onto the main focus of what I wanted to talk about, but yes, so they go through these processes. Generally is studied in anthropology. They get to shamanism, and that's where cohesive societies start to form with the guidance of individuals like shamans. And these shamans are spiritual leaders, and they help people, and they commune with the spirit world, or, you know, perhaps they simply have an experience internal to them using trance or their culture's psychedelic drug to meditate on the problems of their peers and help and advise them and give them advice on how they should proceed. So that is a stepping stone of society, I would say. So, and another thing here, which will make sense once I tie this all up into a nice, neat little bow, is stoned ape theory. And this isn't a very well-established scientific theory, but the stoned ape theory is a controversial hypothesis first proposed by American ethnobotanist and mystic Terence McKenna in his 1992 book, Food of the Gods. The theory holds that cognitive revolution was caused by the addition of psilocybin mushrooms, specifically the mushroom Psilocybe cubensis, into the human diet around 100,000 years ago, using evidence based primarily on studies by R.L. Fisher and others from the 1960s and 70s. He attributed much of the mental strides made by humans during the cognitive revolution to the effects of psilocybin intake found by Fisher. Now, what I'm attempting to say here is that human evolution could have been aided and abetted by certain psychedelic drugs, such as psilocybe cubensis, such as experiences that could have been brought on by ergot fungus that naturally occurred on rye grain, which was ergot fungus is the origination point of chemical synthesis steps that are required to produce the substance known as lysergic acid diethylamide, otherwise known as LSD, which was first synthesized by Albert Hofmann, Basel, Switzerland, working for Sandoz, etc. He was actually trying to find a treatment methodology for postpartum depression in women. So bleeding after, sorry, not postpartum depression, postpartum bleeding in women after they've given birth to children. And my only logical reasoning on why they were studying ergot fungus is that it's probably a vasoconstrictor, and they were studying different compounds that had vasoconstricting properties in order to, or vasoconstricting properties in different parts of the body in order to develop a drug that could be given to treat that particular ailment. And then he accidentally made his problem child. So, thinking about all of the things that I've said, I'm wondering, right? Tobacco is a very hardy plant. Very, very resilient. It has pesticide built into it, and I'm more than certain that insects and other pests are probably not going to be too fond of eating any of the other substances that scientists have managed to genetically engineer into this tobacco plant. But it got me thinking, given this stoned ape theory and all the things that we've discussed about neurogenesis and what was it? It's over here, isn't it? Neurogenesis and anastasis, which is the natural cell recovery phenomenon, the neuroplasticity effects of these substances in causing new neuronal pathways to grow, not only being a emergent scientific capability for the treatments of depression and PTSD and anxiety and a whole host of other neuropsychiatric disorders, but as, what was the phrase they used earlier? Psychoplastogens. There we go. Psychoplastogens that increase the capacity for brain power in a creature, right? Let's say, hypothetically, our world society crumbles and we die out. Humans no more. The next form of life that comes after us is going to have probably speedrun to intergalactic race, because if our society vanishes and this tobacco plant hypothetically escapes the lab into nature, that plant is going to grow so prolifically everywhere, and perhaps even I know that there are some types of plants that share genes horizontally. So vertical gene transfer is when the plant grows a flower and then has a fruit and has develops seed, and the seed falls on the ground and the seed grows. And then so on and so forth, plant after plant after plant, vertically. But horizontal gene transfer is where plants share RNA between them. So you're going to have a increased chance of vertical gene transfers of these psychedelic drugs. So they're going to be incredibly available in the environment. You're going to have an environment where all of the critical resource that was under the ground has been brought to the top. Hopefully there is no significant stratification of deposition of layers on the earth to cover all of the resources that we've brought to the top of the earth, and there's no tectonic induction that happens for a significant enough amount of time to push all of the resources that we've pulled out of the earth back into it. And hypothetically, our society fails, we all pass away, or we all kill each other in nuclear war. I mean, right there, you've got a very good argument for very rapid mutations to occur in animals. Then you've got an environment that it could be hypothetically filled with plants that have very, like, incredibly strong psychoactive compounds, plus all of the materials on top of the earth, easily accessible, don't need to do deep mining. Just need to go to the landfill, and hey presto, there's all this weird shit. That society that comes after us is going to absolutely speedrun becoming an intergalactic race. So it's almost like a insurance policy, perhaps even. You know, just imagine the militaries go into their deep underground military bases in New Zealand and wherever else they are. I know there's a few in New Zealand. Proliferate the plant, nuke the world, come back out, and enslave the new species. Hopefully not. Hopefully they perish, and whomever inherits the world will have a real good time. Anyway, this is the end of that segment.